I spent 2 decades as a Fortune 500 head of HR sitting in the rooms where promotions were decided. I'm Courtney O'Connell, and I'm bringing you inside the promotion room. Today, I'm interviewing an artist turned HR exec who has work experience at Facebook, Medium, Refinery 29, among other places. And she has got a really powerful story about being ready when those unplanned opportunities present themselves at work, and how nurturing your network and seeking the right advice from the right people can change everything. She also talks about job moves while being very pregnant and how to trust yourself to do hard things. Lauren and I discuss how you can look for psychologically safe cultures. We share stories about our own sometimes rocky transitions from individual contributor to manager, and we talk about how to establish and stick to boundaries at work. This is a good one that you won't want to miss. Now, here's Lauren Newton. Lauren, welcome to the promotion room.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm thrilled you're here. Let's just kind of dive into the very beginning, Lauren. So where are you from? Where did you grow up? And what did you want to be when you were a little girl?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I am calling from New Jersey, born and raised in New Jersey in Bergen County, lived here all of my life, then moved away, did the New York thing, and then came back a few years ago and have been loving it. When I was little, I wanted to be an artist, and I ended up going to art school and was a painter and a photographer. And then when I was graduating college, realized that the one thing that they do not teach you in art school is business. And I wanted to have a more practical approach to life. And so I didn't want to be a starving artist. And so I was like, let me just find a job and see what's out there. And I got really, really lucky and got a call to be a creative recruiter at a staffing agency. And it was a way for me to use my creative background and stay very, very connected to creative communities, but have a more practical job as a recruiter. And at that time, I didn't even know what a recruiter was, but I fell into it and ended up loving it. But when I was much younger, I had very, very high hopes and dreams of being an artist.
Do you still do any art today? Have you been able to pull that forward into adult life?
Yes, as a hobby. And I recently picked up some new watercolors. I have been teaching myself how to do digital art on an iPad. And so I try really hard to incorporate it into my day-to-day and into my, weekly routines. But it's challenging, right? I sort of went right into working in the corporate world in very fast-paced environments for the last 15 years, and I fell away from it for some time. But in the last year, 18 months, it's been very, very important for me to pull that side back out of myself and find some joy in being an artist again.
Yeah, it could, because it's so therapeutic. And this is part of why I love learning about people and what was your dream when you were little, because that's before all the real adulting responsibilities descend upon you, and then you have to get very practical. Exactly. And I do think that there is something very therapeutic about holding on to some of that, just remembering who the pre-10-year-old version of you, what that person loved, because there is something there that in the hustle and bustle of it all, we should hold on to.
Absolutely.
So you tell us exactly how you got this job in recruiting, because you went to art school. You didn't have connections in the business world, I'm guessing. Or maybe you did. So help us understand, because I think there are a lot of people. I was actually just talking to a new undergrad the other day who was curious about how do I get started?
So I'll date myself a little bit, but I remember, so I was in art school, but one of the things that we also did was work with the career center at school, and they helped you figure out what your resume would look like, especially when it was time to graduate and whatnot. And at the time, they were recommending that folks put their resume onto monster.com, if you remember it, right? I don't even know if it exists anymore. But I put my resume on Monster and I just left it there because I was like, I don't know what that's going to do for me. And one day I was just, it had my address and my phone number and all of that sort of stuff on it. And I got a phone call one day. And so a recruiter had found my resume on Monster, thought that my background would be really, really wonderful. They were open to hiring entry-level recruiters at the time, it was a boutique staffing agency. And they gave me a call and I was like, I have no idea what this is, but sure, I need a job. And I went on the interview and I just ended up loving it. And it just made a ton of sense to me. And it was really a crash course in how to be a recruiter and what questions to ask. And I ended up in that role and I was placing creative individuals like graphic designers, creative directors, copywriters, videographers, 3D artists, etc. And I was placing those talented folks with other companies in the tri-state area, basically, big and small companies. And it was fascinating to me. Again, like when I was a college student, and I talk to college students now about this, I had no idea what a recruiter was. I had no idea what a staffing agency was. And so it was one of those things that I tell students nowadays is like, find staffing agencies, connect with people from those worlds and see if they can help you break into industries, because I truly had no idea that the space even existed back.
So, okay, so you're in the recruiting job and you love it. So give us the arc of your career from there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I did the staffing agency thing for a few years, for about 3 or 4 years. And I started realizing that I was placing people in their dream jobs and then they would go off and do their own thing and they would grow in their own career and whatnot. And I started to think about what it would look like to go in-house and be a recruiter in-house. And so that was the next goal that I set for myself. And an opportunity came up at a place called Refinery 29, which at the time was at like this really fun point in their existence, getting really, really popular. And it was actually a contract job at first. And I was like, do I leave my full-time job with, guaranteed benefits and take
Risky.
this leap of faith and, to like try to transition into being an in-house recruiter? And
Yeah.
I talked to some folks that I really admired in my network. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And so I took a contract job and ended up converting to a full-time employee within about 2 or 3 months. So it worked out very well. But that was my first experience being an in-house recruiter working at like a tech startup type environment that was growing rapidly. And it was a blast. It was so much fun. It was very intense work. When I joined, we were about 125 people. And then in my 2.5 years there, we grew to about 365 people. So like lots of work to do.
That's a
Really,
lot of
really
recruiting.
fun. A
Yeah.
lot of recruiting to do. And it was a small team. It was 2 recruiters, 1 recruiting coordinator, a lot of work to do, opening up different offices and whatnot. So it was a lot of fun. And I planned on staying there for a long time. I didn't have any plans of leaving because, again, it was just at this really fantastic point in the company's existence. And then I got a phone call from Facebook, and it was called Facebook at the time. So that's why I still call it Facebook.
Yeah.
But I got a call from Facebook. And at the time I was like, I don't know if I would want to work there, but if Facebook calls, you should probably
You,
answer. And
you
if they
take that
want to
call.
interview you,
Yeah.
yeah, you take that call, you take that interview. And I was also at the time 6 months pregnant with my son. And I was like, oh, should I actually be like trying to get a new job right now and whatnot? But again, I was like, let me just do it for the experience. Let me do it for the plot, right? And I went through the interview process. Before the very, very last step, I called the person who was going to be hiring me. He's fantastic. His name is Jimmy Gould. And I said, hey, like my integrity is pushing me to let you know that I am very pregnant. And I know that you need somebody right away. I know that you need somebody to hit the ground running. I've loved meeting you all, but like, I just want to be very honest and upfront about that. I don't want to, disturb what the team has going on because I'm going to come in and I'm going to have to go right back out. And he was like, I don't care. It's totally fine. I appreciate your honesty and integrity. And, let's see where we go from here. And then they offered me the job. And so then I was like, if Facebook wants to hire you, you got to go to Facebook, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I ended up joining Facebook when I was about 7.5 or 8 months pregnant. And it was bananas and so exciting. And just set my career, I think, on a totally different trajectory than it was on. And I knew going into it that I would either love being in a big tech company or I would just go and learn everything that I
Mhm.
possibly could. It was a
Yeah.
really great opportunity to like take a peek behind the curtain and see how this company grew and scaled.
What
For
was your role there?
context, I was a product recruiter.
Okay.
And so I was hired to find and hire product designers, user experience researchers, and content strategists for very, very specific teams within both Facebook and Instagram, most specifically New York, but really my teams were spread out all over the place. But for context, when I joined, I think that I was one of 1,600 recruiters, just to give you an idea of the scale. It was bananas. And so I was working on a very, very small slice of the pie in very niche sort of teams and whatnot. There were just so many recruiters. There was like a person to do everything, right? And so, I went there and I was like, I'm either going to love it or I'm just going to learn everything that I can. And I realized somewhat quickly that working in that niche way, I didn't love. I wanted to have much more space to spread my wings, to have impact across an entire company and things like that. And so there were also some pretty wild and crazy things happening at Facebook during that period of time. And I was like, I don't know if I want to stay here. And but most importantly, I wanted to go back to a smaller company.
So yeah, and I just
And
just to kind of pause there for a
yeah,
second. I'm kind of taking notes here. So many
great.
points of bravery, right? So taking a
Yeah.
contract role when you've got rent and you've got bills and
Yes.
there is absolutely no guarantee and I'm leaving this cushy job that I really loved. Tell us what went into that leap of faith for you? Because I just that is a risk that not everybody would
Yeah,
be comfortable with. So
totally.
tell us about that.
Yeah, it took a lot of soul searching. And I think another theme that comes up a lot in my career is like talking to other people and learning from their experiences and how they navigated similar circumstances. And so at the time, it's actually when I got my first job, I was hired to replace a woman named Arlene. Shout out to Arlene. She's fantastic. And I have loved following her career. I wish that I had gotten to work with her in my first job, but I was replacing her.
Yeah.
But anyway, she went on to do such phenomenal work in all these other places. And so I actually called her at the time and I was like, hey, there's this opportunity. I love the path that you took into being an in-house recruiter. Do you think this is worth it? And how can I make it worth it for myself? Right. And so I talked to her a lot about like what it was like to be an in-house recruiter, what questions I should be asking the team and myself. How much should I actually charge or like what should my rate be to go contract and what are the things that I have to take into consideration right now that I won't have benefits and all of that sort of stuff. And she was an amazing person to help me think through what that could look like, both for my career and also for my life. And then I talked to other folks that had like done the startup thing before. And so it was just doing some soul searching, talking to people who have been on that journey before, and then really just doing the risk analysis myself around how high risk can I be at this point in my life and just going for it.
And that's a really good point too, right? Because there are different stages of life where you've
Yeah.
got the risk tolerance. I mean,
Yes.
and that ebbs and flows as we go through. But I love the theme and the notion of seeking out
Yeah.
people who you trust and respect to really allow your own gut then to kick in because
Yeah.
it has to be a calculated risk. And then the other one that took a lot of bravery is starting a new job, very pregnant.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us when we start a job, it's like, okay, I've got to prove myself for 90 days and really kick in. And it's a
Yeah.
little bit, white knuckle and nervous. And so tell us about just what went into you being able to control some of that nervousness and that pressure on yourself to hurry up and get back from mat leave
Yeah.
so that you can
My
go and prove to
goodness.
Facebook that they made a great choice in hiring you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was nerve-wracking at first, but I had to have a lot of conversations with myself and remind myself that they also knew what they were signing up for. All right. I'm not the first person at Facebook to have a baby. and to go out on mat leave and whatnot, right? So I had to remind myself, like, I did what felt right to me and let them know ahead of time that this was happening in my life. They made their decision on that information and chose to go forward with it. And I kept reminding myself that like we all knew what we were signing up
Yes.
for here. And
Right.
so it was okay for me to feel okay in the path that was in front of all of us. And everybody was so gracious and so excited for me and just like also overjoyed for me at this point in my life that it also made things really that much easier, right? It wasn't I imagine that other folks could walk into a situation and they realize the new girl is pregnant and they're like, oh, well, this person
Yeah.
isn't going to last long, or is she going to come back from leave? And maybe people did think that, right? But I never
You
experienced
didn't
it,
feel it. That's
and so
amazing.
the environment was also really welcoming
That's amazing.
to me in that way. And then I also learned that there had been many, many, many other people that joined at this point, men and women that joined when they were just about to have a baby. I also remember, I was hiring a user experience researcher. She also I could tell that she was having a hard time telling me what was going on. And she was like, I just want to let you know I'm very, very pregnant. And I was like, oh, girl, me too. I
Yeah.
was too. Been there, done that. You're all good. And I feel like my story really helped her. And she ended up going to Facebook and Instagram. And, I gave her offer the afternoon that she had her baby. She was like, it's
Wow.
fine. I just had her this morning. And I was like, wait a minute, get off the phone, first of all.
So it's like, it makes me think of, remember it used to be work-life balance and now it's really work-life integration. So we're
Yeah,
getting job offers
right.
on the delivery table. And I don't know, we'll talk about boundaries too, because I think
Absolutely.
you're right, especially for working moms. I
Right.
was there as well. Okay. So you're at Facebook, you're starting to feel like maybe it's time for the next move.
Yeah.
So what next?
Yeah. And so then I went on to LinkedIn. I saw this role that was posted at a company called Medium, and it felt like such a good role for me. It was a recruiting role, and they were specifically looking for somebody who had some editorial experience to help build out their editorial function and the rest of their teams. And I thought back to my time at Refinery 29. And I was like, this just feels like it's blending everything that I've done. It feels like a really awesome company to work for. Medium, as some people know, was founded by the ex-CEO of Twitter. And so I was like, this is a proven founder. He's done this thing a bunch of times before, and it feels super aligned to my experience. And from the first conversation that I had with the head of people at that time, I was like, found my people. And we're still very, very good friends to this day. And I joined Medium. Everybody thought I was bonkers for leaving Facebook, of course. But I say that the way that Facebook set my life on a new trajectory and just a new level of compensation and opportunity and things like that, Medium did the same thing and then some for me. And so I still think about Medium as one of the most transformational points of my career. It's probably still my most favorite job that I've ever had. I got to do some of the work that I am most proud of, and it was the best move that I made.
Did you know that? So when you were interviewing, did you get a sense of like, this is going to be life changing, this place? So, I mean, was that, how quickly did you clue into that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think that it took me a few weeks. And actually, the moment that I realized that like, this is a totally different journey than I thought that we were going to be on was when I joined. I joined as the only recruiter, and there were a few people there already, but they were at the time they were outsourcing their recruiting function. And so I joined as an in-house recruiter. And within maybe a month or two of joining, we got from the leadership team our new headcount goals. And I was like, I cannot do this by myself. And the head of people at the time, my dear friend Pema, was like, I think that we need to bring in a head of recruiting so that we can build out the recruiting function. And I was like, yes, I think that we do. And then she said, I'm actually hoping that you want to throw your hat in the ring for that opportunity. And I was like,
Say
I had,
what?
yeah, like,
Had
are
you
you
ever
sure?
thought about right? Like, so this is so interesting because
Yeah.
you were happy as a recruiter. Was it like when you thought about
Yeah.
your 5, 10 year plan, was recruiting it? You love that?
Yeah, I loved recruiting at the time. It was fantastic. Like I just
Yeah.
loved it so much and I
Yeah.
felt like I was really good at it and I had
Yeah.
built a really wonderful network and I just loved it. I also had just come out of Facebook where the path to leadership was very different than in the startup space, right? I had no idea that I could go from being a recruiter to the head of a team, right? The path at Facebook, as well as all of your other big tech companies, you've got to go through quite a few years and growth and promotions before they ever consider you for like to lead an entire team, right? So, it was super surprising to me. I hadn't thought about leadership at that point in my career just because I had been in places previously where that road was very different.
Yeah.
So it was surprising to me, but what was so life changing, I think, about that moment was that I felt like for the first time, I had a manager that saw something in me that I hadn't yet seen in myself. And she was willing to put a really big bet on me and my experience. And she knew before I knew that I would be the person for the job. And so it boosted my confidence. It gave me the experience of having a manager that is like on your side and really invested in my growth, right? In a way that's like, that's a big risk for a leader to take.
Yeah.
For her
Yeah.
to like co-sign me as the
Yep.
next head of recruiting,
Yep.
that would reflect on her as well. And so
Yeah.
it was just such a wonderful moment and pivotal moment for my time, especially at Medium. And that was the moment that I was like, this is going to be a journey.
Right.
And I'm so excited for it.
So tell us about that pivot and so you were managing people that I'm guessing. So you took on the head of, now you're a people manager.
Now I'm a people manager.
So we talk about these career pivots, right? And there are a couple in the arc of a corporate career that are tricky. And that first one, that IC to manager, can be a tricky pivot for people. It
Yeah.
was for me. Tell us
Yeah.
about that experience for you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I went from being an IC to then being charged with building the recruiting team and building a recruiting team that could actually hit the goals. So it wasn't only being a people manager, it was also then like really thinking strategically about the resources that we needed to meet our business goals. So it was, thrown in the deep end sort of situation, but I think that I was able to really rise to the occasion because I had a really fantastic manager myself and the environment that we existed in at Medium was very psychologically safe to be able to say, I've never done this before. Let me talk to other people who have. Let me tap into other resources that I know that can help me. Hey, what do you think about it, etc.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I also want to double click there because I think
Yeah,
it's important for listeners to hear this, that there are organizations that exist out there that are psychologically safe to
yeah,
say, I don't know. I don't know this. And what are your thoughts as I formulate my decision here? That is not a conversation that some people are comfortable having because they're in an
totally.
environment where it's like, well, if you don't know, you shouldn't be in the seat. And
Yeah,
so step aside.
yeah,
Coming up. So I mean, what are the hallmarks in your point of view to psychologically safe culture for those folks who are out in the market or they're interviewing, just given your experience, what should people be looking for when it comes to identifying a culture that
yeah.
be more that?
Yeah, totally. I think that, and this has been something that I've carried with me and my leadership journey is vulnerability and transparency. I think a lot of leaders try to be transparent. They're transparent about numbers. They're transparent about, their growth plans and all of that kind of stuff. But like, are they transparent about their shortcomings? I don't know. Yeah, it's so scary. But I feel really, really lucky that I was able to become a leader in a psychologically safe environment because I got a lot of practice at being very transparent about the things that I didn't know, the things that I needed to bring in experts for, where I needed to hire somebody that was smarter than me, more senior than me, etc., I was able to do that in a safe environment because I do think that that skill, and I do believe that it is a skill, practicing that type of vulnerability is usually a really good sign of a psychologically safe environment. If you have leaders that are able to be self-reflective and vulnerable about the things that they are still learning or that the gaps that they have in their experience, I think that's a good sign because there are so many other environments where people do not feel safe doing that or being
Nope.
that way.
Nope.
But I think it's a really, really, really important part of being a leader. And
Yeah.
for me personally, I think it's one of the things that has set me apart and contributed to my success as a leader. And when I say success as a leader for myself, I mean that like I've got a ton of people that I've hired over years and years and years that I know would gladly come work with me anywhere that I go.
You
I've
have
hired some
the
people time
followership.
and time again. I have
Yeah.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
And I have people that I can talk to and call on for their expertise that are leaders themselves now that will pick up my phone call, right? And I truly think it's because I have led with a level of vulnerability that is not often seen, especially in like cutthroat tech spaces.
Hmm. And how beautiful that that was modeled for you so
Yeah.
early. When
Yes.
I think back on my
Exactly
career,
that.
right? I mean, like, how fortunate because
Yeah.
not everybody is. I wasn't. In fact, when I think back
Yeah.
early on in my career, I remember I had a boss early on that was horrible. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm learning what not to do because I
Yes.
was ambitious. So I knew I wanted to be a leader someday. And it was like, woo, this is a miserable experience. I hate working for
Yeah.
her. It is right. And so it's like, these are the things not to do. And then as I went along, there were bits and pieces of managers that I admired. And I feel like I connected all of those puzzle pieces and then put my personality overlay on it, right? Because we want to be
Yeah.
authentically ourselves. So when you're not fortunate enough to have that modeling and
Yeah.
come up in that way, we can still figure it out. Okay,
Absolutely.
so now you're head of recruiting,
Yeah.
and what happens next?
Yeah, I'm head of recruiting. I built a fantastic team. I built a team. We had, not including myself, I had 6 full-time folks. Some were recruiters, some were recruiting coordinators. And then we eventually ended up having 3 contract recruiters that were also working with us. So, we went from 0 to 100 real quick. But it was so fun. It was just such a blast to grow this company. And again, I was really lucky to join Medium at a time where it was the brand and the platform was just booming. And it was a really exciting time to be part of this fantastic company. And I got to work with so many incredibly talented people. And I just look back on that time. It was also pre-pandemic. And so, there was a really fun in-office culture and all of that kind of stuff. And that was one of the first places that I got to work again with people that I brought some people from Facebook with me and everything like that. And we just had a blast. It was so, so fun. And then about a year and a half later, the head of people decided to move on from the company. And we got another head of people who had joined. He had worked in like hyper growth organizations, and Medium at the time had plans to really, really grow even beyond what we were. And he came on to really set us on the path to growing to, 500 and beyond. But then a few months after that, it was the pandemic. And we were like, maybe we're not going to grow as much. And so that VP of people stayed for about, I want to say 8 months, 6 to 8
Mm,
months, and decided, you know what, this is actually not the journey for me. And he decided to move on from the company. Before he decided to move on, though, I had gotten the itch to do more than just recruiting. And I was, again, in a fantastic environment, and I was able to sort of look around and say, like, where are the gaps? What could I do next? And so I asked if I could take over and start learning our compensation practice because that felt like a very natural extension to
mhm.
recruiting. And then I asked if I could also take over employee experience because that also felt like a very natural progression
Yeah.
to recruiting.
Yeah.
And I was told that I could do so. And so I ended up sort of inheriting and learning compensation along the way. And then also our employee experience team started reporting to me. So I ended up with an even larger team and grew as a people manager as well. Then when the sitting VP of people decided to move on, when we decided as a company we weren't going to grow, he said, do you want to throw your hat in the ring to become the head of people at the company? And I again was like, wait a minute, me? Are you
For me?
sure? And again, I led with like, hey, seems like an amazing opportunity. I am super confident in these areas of the people experience overall, but here's the experience that I don't have. And I mean, yeah, I think some people are very scared to say what they don't know and whatnot. For me, it is truly just so attached to my personal integrity to just be real about these sort of things. But I think that what I have always done in addition to that is I've always come with a plan to say, these are the things that I don't know, but here's how I'm going to bridge the gap. But here are the resources that I'm going to tap into to fail because of these shortcomings.
Yeah.
Right. And
So
so,
I want to call out two things. Sorry to interrupt
yeah,
because I think there are two really
that's okay.
they're like salient things here that I just really want to highlight. The first is speaking up. And hey, here's what I'm really curious about. So, compensation and employee relations, if you don't speak up, no one's going to mind read or no, it
Right.
might not be on anybody's radar. And so you
Yeah.
raised your hand and you said, this is what I might want to do. So I think the fact that you have to make it known
Yes.
and
You
make sure the
have
right people
to.
right, are hearing it. And then the second thing is the plan. So
Hmm.
nobody knows everything, not even this board of directors. But what truly does set people apart, in my mind, are the ones who say, I don't know it and I know exactly how to get the answer.
Yeah.
So
Right.
give me a moment and let me come back and get it, right? Because
Yeah.
that instills the confidence. I'm not worried that you
Yeah.
don't know it. What worries
Hmm.
me is if you don't know that you don't know it. That's the scariest part. You don't know it, but you also are waiting to get the instructions on what you're supposed to do about it. So that's it for that. So I just want to call those two things out because
For sure.
what kind of felt natural for you to do is like, hey, listen up. These are like
Yeah.
really cool, important points.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And when I talk to folks today that are sort of at that mid-career point, they're looking to go from manager to director or they're looking to be a manager for the first time, I tell them like, hey, if you were on my team and you came to me with, a problem or a gap in your experience or whatever it is, and then you look to me for the answer, that is not proving that you're ready to operate at the next level. But if you come to me and you say, here's the problem that I see, and here's how I think that we can solve it in these two or three ways, that is modeling to me that you are thinking at the next level. Right. And so that is what I have always, I can't say if I'm sure that I learned that from other people, in my orbit at some point. I can't pinpoint exactly when I learned to do that. I think that I am naturally an over communicator. And so I'm always thinking about what is the plan. But I think that that characteristic has served me very, very well in my leadership journey because I never wanted to be the person who didn't at least have some idea of a plan of how we were going to solve whatever was in front of us.
Yeah. And I appreciate you calling that out that some of this might just be my DNA, that I'm an over
Yeah.
communicator. I'm always
Hmm.
thinking two steps ahead. I didn't necessarily learn it. But that's the point here is that
Yeah.
there are some things and we see some people ascend quickly and it's like, why? Why them? I'm doing the same work.
Yeah.
Why them? Well, it's some people do this naturally and good on them. And
Yeah.
the rest of us have to kind of success leaves clues, right? So it's like, what are they doing? Because
Yeah.
these are learnable habits and learnable
Yes.
skills. And so this is why I love these conversations because the stuff that has created career success
Yeah.
is when we distill it down, this is stuff that we can learn.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So head
Mm.
of people now. So now you've got the whole shebang.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
It was really interesting. And at the time, the people team at Medium had grown to about 11 people because we were gearing up towards massive, massive growth. So we were very, very well resourced, had amazing people. I was at the time, I was like a director, senior director level person, and I had three other people on the team that were also at the director level. And so it was a really interesting experience to go from peers with other leaders to then leading those folks. And
Another
again,
tough pivot, another tough
yeah,
career pivot.
really. Exactly, exactly. But the team was so phenomenal. We really, really liked each other. And we benefited from being in an organization that really appreciated and respected the people function overall. So we were able to do some of our best work there and form good relationships, right? It wasn't that sort of like dog eat dog kind of environment. And so it's not lost on me that that was really a favor to us.
Yeah.
But anyway, I ended up becoming the leader of the entire team, including director level folks. And again, I led with like, hey, I am the type of leader that believes in hiring a team of experts, that I believe in hiring people that are more experienced than me in certain areas, that might have more years of experience than me. And I am still going to rely on all of you to make our entire team successful. And I think that leading with that humility and vulnerability and transparency really set us up well to be a really strong team that continued to work really, really well together. At the time, I was also the most tenured person on the people team outside of one other person. And so I had also been able to build up a lot of like equity with the entire organization. And so I was really, really well received. That was a fantastic transition, I think, for the entire organization, especially during a time where it felt a little bit scary with all of the other things that were going on. But it was a great transition. And I feel really, really lucky that I got to work with the team that I got to work with.
Yeah. Well, I think the other point about being known. So you were
Yeah.
known across the
Yes.
organization. And sometimes you're in a role where you cut across, and maybe that was part of recruiting, where you cut across into every department
Yeah.
head because you're recruiting for
Yeah.
them. And other times you're in more of a siloed role, getting that networked internally or that known internally does take some planning.
Does. Yeah.
And right, and you've got to figure out, how do I get on Lauren's calendar and what do I talk to her about? Because I don't cross over
Yeah.
with her. And that's okay too, because
Yeah.
again, you get on, hey Lauren, what are your priorities? Here, I would
Mhm.
look at what your team is working on. Here's what my team has got going on. Where might there be some
Yeah.
overlaps? Let me support you, right? So there's always something to lead with. And if you are not naturally in a role that has the visibility, you've got to get it. Because
Yeah.
then when the decision makers are behind closed doors saying, we've got this head of people open, what
Yep.
do we all think about Lauren? Now
Mhm.
everybody has a
Mhm.
point of view. And that's the
Yeah.
great position to be in.
hmm Absolutely. And that actually reminds me of like the conversations behind closed doors. What happens? What happens in calibrations and all of that kind of stuff? And actually, before I became head of people at Medium, I was up for a level promotion. I was already head of recruiting, but I was up for a level promotion. And at the time, my direct manager, who was head of people, she was out on leave at the time. So she wasn't around. And I ended up reporting into my skip level. And that person was a very, very, very different style of manager and communicator and didn't know my work as intimately, obviously, as the head of people at the time did. When my manager and the head of people went out on leave, I was sort of thrust into, okay, I'm the only other manager on the team. And I needed to step up and lead in a different way. And I had now direct access to the executive suite that I hadn't had before. And so communicating is different and whatnot. And I still remember we were sort of in the middle of our middle to end of our performance cycle around the holidays. It was right around Christmas. And this person, my skip level, right around Christmas, wanted to rush hire another person. And the only way that we could get it done was if we had one of our IT people physically drive a computer over to this potential new hire over the Christmas break. Now, at the time, we were closed during the Christmas break for 2 weeks. Nobody was working, the company was closed, et cetera. And I was like, this is the only way to get this to happen. I don't think it's appropriate to ask somebody, the day after Christmas to go drive this over to this person when we could just wait another week. Like, it's okay. And my skip level was very unhappy about that. Very, very unhappy about it. I didn't really think anything of it. Eventually, the, head of IT said the same thing as me and said, nope, we can't do it. We're not going to do that. Let's wait a week. And then I waited a week. But then a few weeks later, a very close colleague of mine pulled me aside and said, hey, I want to let you know that I was in calibration sessions and your promotion came up. we were talking about your promotion. And your skip level brought up this incident and said that you should not be promoted because you told him no in that moment. And it made him feel like you weren't a team player in that moment. And he didn't think that you deserved a promotion based on that moment. And she said, I just want to also let you know that so many people fought for you in that moment. And so many people brought up all of your other work and all of your other relationships, and you got the promotion. And it was such a fascinating moment for me because it was also the first time that I had such a clear example of realizing that you cannot assume that everybody has your best interest in mind. You cannot assume that every other leader is willing to really cultivate the next layer of leadership. And you cannot assume that, at the moment, I was like, I am being an absolute team player. I'm making it so that teams don't have to drive,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm. Right.
across the city the day
Yeah.
after Christmas and interrupt their schedule. And, and I'm providing a solution that is totally reasonable. But
Yeah.
in that moment, that person actually took my pushback as me not being ready for a promotion despite all of my other work. So I also think that it's very, very important to stay aware and not blissfully ignorant about
Hmm.
who may or may not be in your corner and how even little things like that can interrupt a promotion, and why it's so, so important to forge really strong relationships with other people that are going to be in rooms that you are not, and they can push for you in that way.
Yep. That is a perfect example. I'm curious about your skip level. Now, so you heard what went down. Now the light bulbs are like, okay, you can't trust everybody. These are really good lessons,
Yeah.
sometimes hard ones.
Yeah.
When you think about it though, was there ever a moment with him when you look back where it's like, oh, I should have known. I should have known. And I missed it because I was being optimistic or maybe a bit naive. What did you miss something there or did you learn?
That's a great question. And I think that in some ways, yes, I'm like, "Ugh, of course this person would do something like that," because there had been other people that had been challenged by working with this person. He had a very particular personality, very particular way of communicating, and a very inflated sense of his role and his importance of the company. So like should not have been lost on me that that could potentially come my way. But before that, I actually thought that we had a really good working relationship and a really open and honest and transparent, relationship with each other and conversations that we had with each other. I think the difference is that I had never been put in a situation to directly challenge that person and challenge something that that specific person wanted themselves, right? It was much more about challenging things that were going on in the org and where our company was going in the next few years and whatnot. But I think that this person took it as a direct challenge to what
Yeah.
he was asking for.
Yeah.
And that was a different dynamic that I hadn't
Yeah.
experienced before
Yeah.
in my career.
Yeah.
So, I'm not surprised by
Right.
it. But it was interesting because previous to that, I actually thought we worked really, really well together.
Yep.
And while that was the first time that I directly experienced something like that, it certainly was not the last time.
Yeah.
So it
So
did give me a really, really good idea of what it meant, especially as, the only woman, the only Black woman, the only woman of color in those spaces, what it is like to have the courage to say no or push back, and what those like potential implications could be for me and my leadership.
Yeah, depending on who you're pushing back. I had a client when I was internal HR and I was supporting one of the business unit presidents, and I had to tell him no on something. And he went to my boss and said, she's a blocker. Courtney's a blocker.
Yeah.
So a very
Yeah.
similar situation. And it was shocking
Mhm.
because again, this was a business unit president that I had worked with for at least a year. I thought we had a great
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
And then whoop, and now here we are.
Yeah.
So lesson is you do have to have your eyes wide open, right? And this is when we talk about corporate politics and people are
Yeah.
like, I won't play politics, I won't do it, I hate it. You don't get away from it. So
Mhm.
if you have aspirations and you want to continue to grow your career, this is what we talk about when we talk about politics. Now,
Mhm.
Lauren and I had absolutely no control over the seats that those individuals sat in. Okay. Above our pay grade is who it is.
Yep.
And we still have to figure out a way to work and partner with them. in
Yeah.
a healthy way, short of us
Yeah.
quitting and leaving, which
Right.
is not always the best. Sometimes it is the right course
Yeah.
of action. Other times,
Right.
no. But what you have to do is get really smart and clue in, like, got it. I've got that person's number. So now I know next time I
Yeah.
need to push back, there needs to be some finessing because there's clearly a
Yeah.
lot of ego there. They
Right.
want to be surrounded by yes people. That's not always going to be me. It's not my role.
Yeah.
So how do I pivot my communication to influence in a more impactful way?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because it's so easy to be so discouraged by that type of situation and just let it completely deflate you. I'm such a big champion of saying, like, what can I learn from
Yeah.
this? And
Yeah.
a lot of times those moments are, yeah, sure, it could be frustrating to like have to communicate with that person again, or you might get nervous or anxious the next time you come into a situation where you may have to push back or say no. But hopefully, you're able to be reflective of those moments and say, what could I have done
Yeah.
differently or better? Or now I know that like this was not an acceptable solution for the person. So what else can I bring to the table? Or how else can I explain why it's important that we don't have somebody drive a laptop across town the day after Christmas? You know what I mean? Like it just hopefully folks can be reflective in that way in these moments and just use it as a moment to add to your toolkit when it
Yeah.
comes to communication, when it comes to problem solving, et cetera.
So good. So I want to go back to the idea of boundaries and work life. So you had your kiddo whilst at Facebook. As a working mom myself, I am always really curious, and I ask this of men too, because I do love seeing more men involved in the child care. But how have you handled and struck a good, healthy balance for yourself, your family, and
Yeah.
still managed your successful career?
Yeah, totally. So first of all, I feel like I hit the jackpot with Chase's dad because at the time when I was working at Facebook, he was working from home. He's worked remote for like most of his career. And I had 4 months off of maternity leave. And then I went back to work. I did not have any like ramped schedule or anything like that. I think that they've changed that now, but I went right back to work. And you know, like when you have especially your first kid, your brain changes completely and getting thrown right back into work was really, really, really challenging. But I was very, very lucky to have a partner at home that was like full dad mode, you know, taking care of our kid when we were working and he was at home and he was still working at home and still doing it. I was really, really lucky to have my parents nearby to help as well. And so my support system was
The
really
village.
what
Yeah.
helped me get back to work
Yeah.
and feel okay about it. That's not to say that I didn't feel immense guilt, right? Especially, you know, working a job like that, I was sometimes out of the house before my son was awake. And when I would come home, he would maybe be awake for 2 hours. So I do feel like I missed a lot of time with him. But I can also say that my boundaries got a hell of a lot stronger when I became a mom because those 2 hours after work, I was like, do not call me. Do not schedule me for calls. Don't send me a message. Nothing. I will not be answering after work. And that is that I will not be answering on weekends.
Yeah.
It's just, I felt very, very empowered to do that because I realized that I had such limited time with my new little baby.
Yeah.
And I knew that, you know, I wouldn't get it back. I was very spoiled with a mother who was a teacher and who was always on my schedule. And you know
Same.
what I
Yes.
mean? And so when
Yeah.
I realized the stark difference of being a woman working in the corporate space that's working 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever it was, I was like, oh, like I don't have any time with my kid. And so I just felt really, really strongly about having those boundaries. And I was able to uphold them throughout, you know, the rest of my career. I will also say that after working at Facebook, I was one of few parents that were working there at the time. So there were a lot of young people that were working there and not I was young too, but like people
Mhm.
without families that were working
Mhm.
there that like could stay at the office until 8 o'clock and be fine with it. And then, do whatever they had to do. Then when I went to Medium, it was a very different environment. There were tons of parents. And that is where I actually felt myself be able to like blossom as a working parent because I was amongst so many other working parents and we just got it. We understood that like after work time is after work time with our families, holiday time, vacation time, etc. Like it was just a much more family centric type of environment. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Find your tribe. And when you find a company that fits into the cycle of life that you are
Yeah,
in any given moment, that is a
exactly.
gift. Yeah, yeah, it's
Super
good, Lauren.
important.
Awesome. So I
Hmm.
always like to wrap up by asking my guests your favorite book. I love to read. I have lots and lots of books and always love to add. So especially self-help and business books. So what have you got?
My gosh, that is such a good question. I read so much and so many books. I'm a big audiobook girly. You know what? I know this is, I also read a lot of fiction to escape my crazy, chaotic life. But one of the books that I read, especially when I became just to understand like what that could look like and what I should be thinking about. And also at the time, Medium was, we had just done 3 acquisitions of other companies and things like that. I read the Netflix book called No Rules Rules.
Yes.
And that was like a very, very eye-opening book for me as a new people leader working in this scrappy startup environment with so many different things going on. And like I said, we did 3 different acquisitions, added 3 different teams to our organization. And like understanding how companies could thrive through that type of growth really like made me really set the rest of my career up for how I think about people stuff. Because then after, growing at Medium, growing into a VP of people there, I then went to another company where I went in as the VP of people. And so like we were talking about before, like I didn't have equity with all of these people. And so I really needed to know and learn all of the OG staff that was there, and then all of the new people that had joined in the last 2 months, and what our company growth would look like and whatnot. And I often just thought back to, especially the first few chapters of that book, where they talk about how like the people who had been with Netflix from the very beginning, how they needed to evolve with the culture. Otherwise, it really wasn't going to work for
Mhm.
them, especially. I always went back to those few chapters to understand like what could that look like. And I think it's just relevant for the space that I've been in.
Yeah.
So that is that. I will tell you that my favorite nonfiction, or rather fiction book for this year that I've loved is Theo of Golden.
I've heard of this and I think it's in my Audible cart, but I have not pulled the trigger.
It's
Okay. So this is
It's so fantastic, especially on Audible or especially as an audiobook. And I think that in this season of my life and my career, I am looking to get back to art. I am looking to get back to connecting with people in my community. I am looking to learn from the older people in my community. And this book is just such a wonderful and also heartbreaking story of all of those things combined. So, I think especially for people that are very burnt out and like working really, really hard in the environment in which we work in today, a book like that is such a needed breath of fresh air to keep your humanity in the forefront of your mind that like we are all just people trying to exist and find the beauty in life. So that's another really wonderful book that I recommend.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Of course.
recommendation.
Yeah, of course.
Lauren, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure and inspirational, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I love, 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 love talking about these things. And I think it's so important for other people to learn about everybody else's journey because it is likely relevant to whatever you've got going on in your career.
It sure is. It sure is. We loved having you in the promotion room. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me inside the promotion room, and be sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. Cheers to your success.